Earlier, I had a chat with Director, Confucius Institute of the University of Lagos, Professor Chimdi, on the different responses by various countries and if he thinks China should take responsibility for how far the coronavirus has spread. Professor Chimdi, thank you for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel. We're seeing all of these reactions as, countries try, to stem the spread of coronavirus. What do you make of the impact that this is having on international relations?
It's actually quite difficult to give a direct assessment of the impact, but it's obvious that this is part of what we're experiencing from globalization, international relations, community relations, and interpersonal relations. We have all enjoyed the positive aspects of them when there are inventions in one place and it goes throughout, and then technological advancement, the world has enjoyed it. But for the, let me not say for the first time, but for this very occasion, it's another experience for the world that has become quite global. So it's part of globalization. Despite the fact that this particular virus originated, or so to speak, from Wuhan in China, it's been able to go around the world as we speak today. And it has followed the trade routes, the diplomatic routes, and then the friendship or let's say cordial routes between nations. Okay. It has spread through travels, it has spread through scientific contacts, it has spread through economic relations. And you find out that China, where it originated, appears to have become, to an extent, the center of world activities. So virtually all countries of the world, in one way or the other, has had a relationship with China before the outbreak. Diplomatically, economically, scientifically, and technologically, all through. And the reflection of the spread of the Wuhan virus or COVID-19 virus is also a reflection of the relationship between China and the entire world.
And, in trying to stem the tide, some countries are beginning to shut their borders, to certain other countries, and they're imposing travel bans, at least for now. What do you make of this?
I don't even know whether that's going to help a lot. But if any measure that can help to combat that, I will go for, If any country feels that shutting their borders will help them, then it's okay. But one big warning, it's sure going to affect a lot of other things. I have observed that, yes, it is contagious, it is deadly, but the mortality rate isn't as severe as the mortality rate of most other viruses that the world has experienced. So it is becoming treatable or manageable medically. And I think the best way now is, or the best approach should be, to look for measures to prevent and to intervene whenever it happens, rather than taking a panicky action.
So for other countries like Italy and Iran, Italy, for instance, has imposed a lockdown on the country. There's no unnecessary movement about except you have to go to work or you have to get to the hospital. That's what exists in Italy right now. And I know that China also imposed a lockdown on most of its provinces where there were outbreaks of the coronavirus. You see these countries doing these things, and you also see that China has also gone through almost the same thing. Do you think it's okay for them to blame China for what has happened?
No, actually, the lockdown is not because countries are protecting themselves. Somehow, yes, but more importantly, countries want to protect the spread to other countries when it has happened in their own countries. It's a fellow-feeling approach by the world to the world. For instance, if anybody is affected, go home, lock yourself up until you've recovered, or you are collected and quarantined somewhere until you are certified free to mix up with other people. It's not that that person is avoiding other people. It's because there is an instinct in other people to make sure that the world is protected. Italy shutting down It's not because Italy doesn't want to interact with other people. It's because Italy doesn't want it to spread more to other people. And I think from that perspective, yes, it is good. But from the perspective of fear that, oh, we don't want these people to come in because they will bring it inside, it's panicky.
It took a while for the WHO to declare this a pandemic, and that's because they were looking to China and the way China was handling this. But there are many who also feel that, this should have been declared a pandemic long before because of the rising number of deaths, rising number of cases in countries like Italy, in Iran, in South Korea, and so on. So do you think that China handled this really well?
China did, to the best of my knowledge. And one thing I admired about the Chinese approach to it was the sincerity. It could have been diplomatic, it could have been something that they would want to protect in order not to let the world know what is happening. But China opened it and declared that that was the situation. And I think China was able to do so because China thought she had the resources to handle it. To a large extent, yes, it demonstrated to the world its strength, its power to handle such a situation. I agree with you that WHO should have been more involved earlier than now, at least to create awareness, to give publicity and information documents and materials to other parts of the world so that they could know the nature of the virus and how to contend with the virus.
Now the virus is affecting almost every sphere. It's affecting almost every sector. You have international events that have been postponed indefinitely. The IMF spring meetings cannot hold anymore in Washington because of what's going on. International sporting events, for example, the Olympics in Tokyo, Japan, still saying it will go on, but other countries still worry about participation and so on. It's affecting everything. Do you think that this will eventually lead to a remodeling of international relations when this passes over?
There's no doubt that the relationships are being reassessed, even right now. And then internationally, nations, countries, continents, and groups are going to become more aware of what they are into right now. Remember, we became quite curious after the Ebola incident that anybody that becomes sick, you don't rush to touch anymore. Now coronavirus is there. Anybody that sneezes quite often or more than 2 or 3 times, you distance yourself from. It's going to mean that, yes, it's going to mean that individuals, human beings, will become more careful with hygiene. It doesn't mean that activities will shut down. It doesn't mean that relationships will be broken. But it simply means that these days, people, nations, groups are going to be more careful with what they do. It's no longer a matter of I am more developed than this other country. It's no longer a matter of I'm richer than this other country. It's now a matter of who is safe with the other person.
There are conspiracy theories, and I'm sure you've heard some of them. There are theories that say that, this is probably all man-made because of the battle for supremacy between China and the United States, both of them superpowers. Either one or both of them is behind, this coronavirus. What do you make of those theories?
I'm going to speak like a layman. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to be quite obvious. But there is a likelihood that it could have been a mistake. There's also a likelihood that it was inadvertent. There is a third likelihood that it just happened because it's the time for it to happen. So the first one I said about it being a mistake is if during an experiment one of the specimen or the whatever subjects they use escapes the enclave, then there is trouble. If someone was experimenting, has some rats that one is using for experiments, and the rats have been injected with virus and trying to find out what will kill the virus, and one rat escapes, then it could be inadvertent in the other way around that, oh, inside the laboratory things are happening and something similar to this one the mistake I talked about got into somebody's body or into something, and the person comes out, and then there's contact inadvertently, innocently, it goes off. Then there is also the deliberate one that we're talking about, that, okay, let's prepare this and keep, and in case there is supremacy struggle, there is this case of who is bigger, then we know what to do.
In your mind, is the Nigerian government handling this well? The coronavirus outbreak, the 2 cases, or the index case that we have had in Nigeria?
Right now, yes. But let me say it, but I don't know how it's going to happen to any set of people. That initially when it happened, reports were given that people were not checked at the airport while they were coming in. And I was glad when a parliamentarian in Nigeria took it up and made it public that those at the border are not really working for us in this country. That they are not sincere about checking those who are coming in. They are not thorough. In fact, to a large extent, they are lackadaisical about it. So that is not the way to go. But I understand right now, I haven't been to the airport for quite some time, for some weeks, even up to 6 weeks to 2 months. So I do not know how they're doing it. But what I can envisage is that they've tightened up, which is good.
And you hear these other countries shutting borders and taking measures, to control the spread of the virus. Some have said Nigeria should also shut her borders. Do you agree?
How can Nigeria close its border? Initially, when this happened, somebody said, "Oh, Nigeria should ban flights from China," and I laughed.
I heard that too.
How could you ban flights from China? There are no flights from China. Nigeria doesn't have a national carrier that goes to China. There are no carriers from China that come to Nigeria. There are essentially 2 major airlines which bring passengers from China to Nigeria. I mean essentially 2, but you can't say of others. That's Ethiopian Airlines and Emirates. Ethiopian Airlines comes from Addis Ababa to Lagos, to Nigeria. So you do not know who are in the flight. Emirates comes from Dubai to Nigeria. You do not know who are in the flight. The point is that those who are coming from different cities in China will now come to Dubai and mix up with those who are coming from different other cities in a flight coming from Dubai to Nigeria. Will not make you restrict flights from Dubai to Nigeria. Because those that are coming from London are in the flight. Those that are coming from Beijing are in the flight. Those that are coming there, it's connecting flight. It's the same thing with Ethiopian Airlines. So we need to get organized first before we start thinking in terms of concretizing these things, pinning them down, putting restrictions, and the rest of the things like that.
Professor Chimdi Madago, thank you so much for speaking with us. Now, because of the global health crisis, I can't shake hands. I'm sure you understand, but much appreciated that you're here on Diplomatic Channel.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
That's the program today. I'm glad you could join us. Missed any edition? You can always catch up on the playlist on YouTube. Just log on to youtube.com/channelsweb, go to playlist and search for Diplomatic Channel. In the meantime, I look forward to your reactions and comments at Amarachi_Ubani on Twitter and at Amarachi Ubani on Instagram. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.